Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with another video. I'm editing and uploading these back to back, and they most likely will get posted back to back as well. So if so, this is the third video of 3 so far. So this is using the just released Christmas Foliage Stencil set from Simon Says Stamp. It is a set of 4 Slimline stencils. 3 of them are the different layers, and then the 4th stencil is the whole pattern. So you can do the layering like I'm going to do here, and then I'm actually going to use the full pattern one on the inside of the cards. So to make my life easier, I'm working with my Waffle Flower stencil mat, and it's got the raised edges on 2 sides. And as long as you're paying attention when you're using layering stencils, like with these ones, on the bottom of the stencil it has the Simon Says brand etched into it, and then I think the stencil number or whatever. So I just made sure that each of these stencils had the name, the brand on the bottom, aka the right hand side of this, and then that way I don't have to tape these stencils down anything, because the next one will line up, because I'm just butting everything right against the raised edges of this stencil mat. And then I'm blending colors over the stencils using Simon's newer Pawsitively saturated inks. I don't know the colors offhand. I'm still I'm loving the inks, but it's it's gonna take me a while to memorize the colors. But I used from the previous ink release, I used the pinky red sort of colors for all these poinsettias and the little circles. And then I used, I think it was cantaloupe. I will have them all linked, the specific colors I used. So I used that for the little flowers. And I'm going to repeat the process because I just took a piece of white cardstock, cut it in half, and then did my ink blending. So it's might as well do 2 while I'm at it. And by having the cardstock a little bit larger, it just gave me leeway as to how I'm going to trim these down in the end. So I started with this stencil, and I'm using my little Simon blending brushes. That just gave me a little bit more control so I could do multiple colors, as well as on the poinsettias, and I do this on some of the greenery too. I'm going to do multiple colors, so a smaller brush lets me, add a little bit of one color and then go in with a second, sometimes a third, whatever works. So I did the same thing with this stencil. I did kind of lighter greens on the leaves, and then on the little pine branches, I did a deeper green. So just went along. Like I said, it's simple. This is even though it's multiple colors and multiple stencils, it's simple. I could have, kept going and just repeating. You just do everything with the one stencil first. So you do your first layer, go through it. Now I'm doing layer 2, and then I'll do layer 3. So it's just, that's how I mass produce. You do all this, each step multiple times all at once, and then you go on to the next one. So with the 3rd layer, I wanted to mix up the greenery a little bit. So I added blue first. I think this is surf. And then I just blended green above it. Just gives it that different tone of greens to mix it up a little bit, just cause. And then another option, I'm going to add splatter, of course. But I did think with this, but I couldn't find it because I'm still reorganizing everything. I've mentioned this in other videos. We moved my office into the garage. Anyway, I can't find my glitter paste, but to use the full stencil on after this is all done, so you've got all the different colors of the layers, and then you could use the full stencil at the very end and do glitter paste or a clear crackle paste. Something like that would be really, really pretty, and it would just amp it up even more. But like I said, I use splatter instead. So gold, Gonzai Tomby, watercolor, splatter, my go-to. So I mixed it up. I'd added water to it, swirling it around with my fan brush. I didn't add blobs. Depending on my mood, sometimes I want really, really heavy splatter, big blobs. With this, I didn't. I just kind of wanted a light splatter. So even on camera right now, it's not super obvious, but you'll be able to see it at the end and in the pictures. But I just did a light splatter of this all over. It just gives it that little extra something. So I did that to both backgrounds. And while I was doing that splatter, I have my glimmer machine there. My Spellbinders glimmer machine's heating up because I want to do a little bit of hot folding. So I'm using the Joyous Christmas hot foil plate from Simon. I did a previous video using this, and I have some matte gold foil, and I trimmed that down to size. And then I'm just going to put my plate onto the machine because it's heated up, and then you put the foil with the nice side of the foil facing the plate. And then my cardstock, I'm using Hammermill cardstock. And once that's in place, I'm not worried about lining it up or anything. That's why I'm not taping it or doing a hinge or anything like that. And with this, I find for me, I use the shim, a cardstock shim, and the spacer plate. And then I press the button. And once the button is done flashing and goes solid, it takes about a minute. So it's heated up. I take the platform out of the base, run it through my Spellbinders Platinum die cut machine. And I go slow. This is sped up a little bit in editing, but I just go slow, let it take its time. And then I can just peel off the foil. And I've got this word with the beautiful matte foil. Like I said, I wasn't worried about lining it up because I'm going to use the wafer die set. There is a separate Joyous Christmas wafer die set that came out, I think, after the hot foil. I can't even remember. But it has the word and the outline works perfectly with this hot foil, so I can just die cut it. I like that a lot, especially with words. I like when there's coordinating wafer dies with hot foil. It alleviates the need to try and line things up. So I ended up doing hot foil for one, and I die cut 2 more layers from white cardstock just to stack behind it to give it the dimension I love. And then rather than do a second one hot foiled, I die cut the word from Simon's matte gold cardstock. Just so you guys can see the difference between the two. Nothing compares to hot foiling, but I know a lot of people don't want to get into that. You don't want to invest in it. It's fine. I'm loving the hot foiling, but I get it. And it's nice that there's like a million options out there. So with this one, rather than stack the words like I normally do, I will, die cut 3 times, have 3 layers for the words, because I like that dimension. This time I actually just did the outline. I stacked that 3 times instead. So that's another option. It works. It kind of satisfies my OCD without having to fiddle quite so much, because this is like a very large word die cut, and using the outline layer is so much faster and easier. So I got everything adhered. So I've got my hot foil sentiment and then my die cut sentiment. So once those were done, I ended up deciding to add a little something extra to these background panels. The splatter is now dry. It needs to be dry for this. And then I am just re-wetting my gold watercolors again. This is a little trick I picked up from Christina Warner's videos. Yeah, she's done this a lot in her videos, and that's just edging the cardstock or like your background, whatever, with metallic watercolors or whatever it is you're painting with. And with this one, it's subtle. I didn't go very deep with it. I'm pretty much kind of running just the side of the brush against the edge of this cardstock, but it gives it that little extra something. And if you want it to be more intense, you can paint like a wider line around the edge. Again, it just depends on the look you're going for, but it's a way to kind of add just either a finishing touch, or in a sense, it almost makes it look like another layer. So that's what I did with these. Just went around the edges, just making sure not to smear what I just painted on those edges. But again, make sure the splatter's dry. Because yeah, I'm the type that is like, I'm going along and not paying attention, and I would smear just everything. But between the die cutting and everything I did in between, the splatter's completely dry, so we're good to go. So I painted all these edges with that gold watercolor, and then let that dry. Doesn't take very long. Again, it depends on what you're painting and what you're using. These dry pretty quickly. So I set those aside to dry, and while those are drying, I'm using the full pattern stencil from the set. And I have my card base here, and then I'm just taping the stencil into place onto the card base. And the tape is more to mask off right past the fold line so I don't get any ink past there. And then I also decided to use the tape just to hold the stencil down because it just makes things go faster. And I'm just blending Simon's Fog ink with a larger blending brush over the inside. Quick, easy. It gives it a subtle pattern, but you get the whole pattern, and it's not so dark or distracting that you can't write right over it. So got that blended, and then I'm going to just carefully remove that stencil, keeping the tape intact so I can reuse it. And again, go on to the next one. If I was making more than 2 cards, I would just keep repeating this process like over and over again. This is Spellbinder's tape that I've been using, and I really like it because a lot of times I can get multiple uses out of like one piece of tape. So blended all that ink over the inside of the card. Once that's done and my like watercolor edging is dry, I'd cut down just some random pieces of cardstock to slightly smaller than those blended panels, and I'm just adhering them together with Craft Tacky glue. I decided to do this rather than use a bunch of foam tape. Also, I only wanted like a little bit of dimension. I didn't want to pop things up with a bunch of foam tape. So this is one way to use up, you know, scraps of cardstock you don't like, etc. So adhered the 2 layers together, and then I'm going to back those stencil panels with these cardstock kind of shims. And then I'd also cut down some green cardstock from my stash that I cut to the exact size of these Slimline cards. These are roughly, I think they're a little over 3.5 by 8.5. I generally do my Slimline cards at about 3.5 by 8.5. That's just habit. It's the easiest size for me, you know, because you just cut a piece of cardstock at 7 inches, and then it'll be 7 by 8.5, scored at 3.5, good to go. So I cut the green cardstock to the same size as the card base, and then I'm going to adhere these panels to that card base so they're popped up just that little bit with those layers of cardstock under them. And then once those are adhered, I can adhere my die cut sentiments. And when I adhere the die cut sentiments, I've got like all these layers going on. All of this is done with liquid glue. And I'm just going to put like my Misty on top of it just to hold everything in place for a couple of minutes. Apologies if my microphone's picking up the heater. My garage heater's starting up because it's getting chilly in here again. But I don't have time to stop the voiceover. Anyway, when I've got like multiple layers like this and I'm going and going, I want to make sure everything's just adhered. Yeah, stick my Misty, a book, you know, something heavy on top just to hold everything down and flat. And then we're good to go. And then as a final little touch, as always, I'm going to add a bit of bling. Another option though, I did the bling because I wanted the poinsettias to have like a center, you know? So I'm using these little apricot, I think they're apricot. I'll have a link to them. Pearls from Studio Claudia. Another option would be just to take that gold watercolor paint and you could like dot that as little centers. It just kind of finishes them off in my opinion. But I like the little bit of pearl bling. So once those were adhered, these cards are done. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. In my blog post, there'll be picture links to make everything easier to navigate and find. All that will be linked directly below the video if you are interested. Thank you guys so much for watching, for thumbs upping, for commenting, subscribing, hit the bell if you haven't already to be notified when I post videos. I also link to all my social media. That's all in the description box below the video. So yeah, you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!